a long time ago, well, it wasn't that long ago, but it's been a while. I watched this documentary. The documentary is called They Call Us Monsters, right? And it's a documentary highlighting the juvenile system. And it took place in California, right? And what they were pretty much trying to highlight is these juveniles that get in trouble and the gang enhancements and everything that goes along with that, right, in the juvenile system and the laws that will take a young man and will try him as an adult, right? They will try him as an adult, and then he could spend possibly the rest of his life in prison for a decision and a choice that he made when he was still a young man, right? And so I remember watching this, and it was a very sad documentary. It was a very touching one, but for me, even more so. It touched me on a deeper level, and let me explain to you guys why. Right? And again, I want to highlight the documentary. If you guys have time, watch it, right? I believe it might be on here on YouTube, but if not, take the time, search it out, and watch it. It brings up a lot of very, very interesting and very powerful topics that we as human beings, as Christians, and just as a society in general, we need to look into. We need to look into our laws. We need to ponder them and think about them and bring them to the awareness of our leaders, of our communities, right? If this is right. If it's right to take a 15-year-old and try him as an adult and put him in prison for the rest of his life, right? And so what got me thinking about this topic, what brought back to my remembrance that documentary that I had watched a while ago. The other day on YouTube, I watched an interview on one of the young men that had been in that documentary. And he had been sentenced to life for attempted murder, right? The rest of his life, but due to circumstances, due to some laws that changed, he was granted an early release, and I believe he only served about 10 years out of his sentence, right? And I saw this interview that they did on him now that he's home, and just the man that he became, right? This young gang member now was a Christian. He did most of his time in prison as a Christian, and that's why he was able to come home early, right? But he is now a born again Christian, and he was a true testimony that people can change, and that a young man at 15 should not be tried as an adult. He should not be sentenced as an adult because his young mind still can't fully process the repercussions of his decision. It can't fully process the consequences of his decision, right? He is a true testimony of that. He is a perfect example of a young man that made horrible mistakes and grew up to be a very good and decent young man, right? Well, so that got me thinking about it, right? But then that also got me thinking about my own life, and let me tell you why. I live in Oregon, and here in Oregon, I want to say it was around 96, 95, 96, they passed a law called Measure 11, right? And I committed a crime, and I was going to be the first young man, I was 15, to be tried under this law in my city, which is Medford, Oregon. I was going to be the first man to be tried under this law, this new law called Measure 11, which tries young men as adults, right? 15-year-old, they were going to try me as an adult. The only thing was, and this is by the grace of God, and this is why I always tell people that God was looking out for me. When they arrested me, the law had passed. So they tried to hit me with the law, Measure 11, but my crime had been committed before the law passed. 2 days before Measure 11 passed, I had committed that crime. So they couldn't try me under Measure 11. But had I been tried under Measure 11 at 15 years old, I would have been tried as an adult. And the crime that I had committed at that time, I believe the minimum was 8 years, and the maximum was like 10, 12, something like that. So at 15, I would have caught 8 years, mandatory, as tried as an adult, right? And so that gets me thinking, right? If you go in at 15 years old and they try you as an adult and you go to prison for 8 years, that's a big chunk of your life. That can change the whole outcome of your life, right? That's a very, very harsh sentence. And so when I think about this, when I reflect on this, when I think about young men that they get charged as adults at 15 and they catch life and they catch 25 years in prison, they catch 30 years in prison, I can identify with that very, very closely because of the lifestyle that I lived. And like I said, I could have been tried under that Measure 11. And I know people that got tried as adults that caught 25 years in prison, 15 years in prison for their first crime because it was a severe crime and they got charged under Measure 11, right? But here's the thing, let me bring all of this to a conclusion. Let me bring all of this to my conclusion, to what I want to share, what I want to talk about. This young man was now serving the Lord. This young man was, like I said, a testament that true change is possible, that people really truly changed. But it was very possible that this young man could have spent the rest of his life in prison. But due to God's grace and some situations that happened in his life, he was able to come home. But there are many, many, many young men all over the United States that will spend the rest of their lives in prison for a decision they made when they were 15, 16, 17 years old. Now, I want you to think back when you were 15, 16, 17 years old. I want you to think back. Were you thinking clearly? Were you thinking clearly? When I committed my crime at 15, all of my crime partners were of the age of 18, 19, 17. But some of them, were 18. They were already adults. I was hanging out with an older crowd, right? I was looking up to older people. I remember even looking up to even older people besides the 18, 19-year-olds. In my neighborhood, we used to look up to what we call OGs. We used to look up to men that had been in and out of prison most of their lives. Men that had no home, men that had no stable family life, men that were still on the streets, that were close to their 30s, maybe past their 30s, hanging out with a bunch of kids because we made them feel important. Because it was the only way that they could feel important, was coming around a bunch of young kids that didn't know any better, that didn't know that, hey, look, this is a prime example of what you don't want your life to turn into. This OG, this old gangster who did nothing with his life, right? Who's addicted to drugs, who comes around the neighborhood and exerts his power around a bunch of young kids, really, because some of us were 15, 14. So the fact that we could look up to somebody like that tells you that our minds weren't fully developed. Our minds couldn't really capture that this man had failed in life. This man wasn't succeeding in life, right? But because of the circumstances, because of what we were taught, because of the neighborhoods that we grew up around, all those situations, we couldn't think clearly. We didn't think clearly. And so I know firsthand that when I was 15, I wasn't thinking right. My brain wasn't fully developed. Even from 15 to 20 was a huge difference in the way that I viewed the world and was thinking about things, right? But just the fact, like I said, that we could look up to these men that really had done nothing positive with their lives. They were still on the streets, drug addicted, hanging out with a bunch of kids. How in the world could somebody in their right mind look up to that? How in the world could you say that somebody that views that life as something that they would want to strive for is thinking with the right mind. When they have all these people around them that are telling them that that is what you're supposed to grow up to be like, that is what you should strive for. But it's only till you come outside of that bubble, of that world, maybe by going to prison, which takes you to a whole nother situation, right? Where there is a lot of that, but then there's also other people teaching you. There's also other people coming into that environment and telling you what your life could be like. And God puts the right people in your life. And it's until God puts the right people in your life that can speak into your life, that once you come outside of that bubble, be it at school, be it, like I said, through prison programs, be it through church, be it through people coming into your neighborhood preaching, different opportunities that are given. It's only until you start to see people outside of that bubble, it's only until you start to look at your uncles, it's only you start to look at people that actually are successful, and you start saying, wait a minute, this isn't all there is in life. This gang, this neighborhood, these people, this isn't all there is in life. But see, when you're young and your brain isn't fully developed, to you, that's all there is. It's just that neighborhood, that bubble, is just that group of friends. You think you're going to be friends with these people forever. You think that your life, that these people are going to be a part of your life forever, right? And so you want to impress them. You want to be in right standings with them. You want to be in right standings, like I said, with a bunch of men who their only outcome in life, if they continue living the way they're living, is going to be, they're going to be in prison for the rest of their lives, homeless, or overdose on drugs, or get killed on the streets, right? But once you come outside of that, once you start to think differently, like I said, even at 20, even at that age, is a huge difference from 15. I was already thinking, like, man, is this really the way that I want to live the rest of my life? And not even 20, at 19, my mind started thinking, my brain started shifting. I started saying, hey, this isn't the life I want to live. I was in prison at that time for something else. And I just started thinking, look, this is not the life that I want to live. And so we need to be very careful. We need to be very careful with the laws that we pass, and we need to have a very good judgment on how we sentence criminals. A young 15-year-old man should not be sentenced equally as a 25-year-old man. And I understand that there's victims to the crimes. I understand that, and I understand that the victim's family would want that person to spend the rest of their life in prison for harming their loved ones. I understand that. And I probably would want the same thing too. Except for the fact that God has changed my heart. And when God changes your heart, you start to view things a little bit differently, because just like you would want somebody to spend the rest of their life in prison for harming your loved one, if your loved one harmed somebody, you would want the judge, you would want society to be merciful on them. You would want that. You could say whatever you want. If your 15-year-old son, 15-year-old nephew, 15-year-old whatever committed a crime, you would want the justice system to have some mercy on him. You would not want him to spend the rest of his life in prison. Yes, he should spend time in prison. Yes, he should be punished. But he should have an opportunity to learn his lesson, change his life, and come home and have a second chance. So this, like I always say, this is a Christian channel, and this might not be a topic that 100% falls under that category, but I felt it important to speak on it. I felt it important to maybe awaken you guys a little bit to the knowledge that it's happening. Obviously, we know it's happening, but sometimes it takes somebody reminding us of it, right? That a lot of young kids are out there, a lot of young men are gonna be spending the rest of their lives in prison if certain laws don't change. And so I'm asking you to pray and seek God and ask God to soften your heart, to give you a little bit more of a merciful heart, and that you start praying about this. You start praying that God would move on the hearts of judges, of community leaders, of governors, that they would start looking at these laws and resentencing young juveniles that have already been sentenced under these laws, and that the laws would change, and that young men would have second chances like God has given all of us second chances, right? So I'll end this video with this. I pray that it, like I said, opens your heart, opens your mind, opens your eyes, right? The documentary is called They Call Us Monsters. So I really recommend that you watch it, and be blessed, all right?